Of bodies suspected to belong to victims of yet another alleged cult-related tragedy, this time on the outskirts of Malindi in Kilifi County, the same region where over 400 bodies were recovered from the Shakahola Forest last year. Prosecutors say victims may have died from the starvation and suffocation. Now, for the latest, we joined live by our correspondent, Alex Kiarie. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening. How are you? And hope your listeners are also okay. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that, Alex. Alex, what more do we know about this new case? How did investigators discover the graves near Malindi?
Actually, this latest case is still within the same Shakahola Forest, which is part of what we call the Chakama Ranch within Malindi area of Kilifi County. And it is being linked to one of the survivors of the previous case that was that emerged in March 2023, that was linked to a man called Paul Mackenzie, who then led an outfit called New Hope International Ministries, which was behind all these issues that have emerged. So it's being alleged that this man was saved from that as a survivor and then rehabilitated, then taken back home to his rural area in Western Kenya. But he recently went back to the same area near where the first case was reported. And that's where now locals discovered some graves, and then some people were already in dire straits and reported to an organization called Vocal Africa, whose leader spoke to this evening and confirmed that actually they identified initially 6 graves that are supposed to be exhumed. Before, of course, they had to get a court order to do that. That's what the court ruled on, and then now we're waiting to see when and how this is going to be happening soon.
How many bodies are believed to be buried at the site?
So initially, there were identified 6 shallow graves that were supposed to be exhumed, but according to Vocal Africa director Khalid Hussein, he says that it's around 47 bodies that are the graves that have been identified, and the number could actually rise depending on when and how they are going to go about it. Because remember that initially during the 2023 case, around 8 sites remained untouched because up to 429 bodies are still in the mortuaries awaiting identification, and so far some of them were in really bad shape and actually barely skeletons, and this makes it very difficult for them to be identified. So they decided to halt it first, and then first after identifying the 429 bodies, then they'll proceed to the other sites that are still being still under guard as we wait for the date and when to be exhumed.
Are these deaths linked to Paul Mackenzie or a different group?
It is linked to Paul Mackenzie, but differently, because this is a former member of Paul Mackenzie's outfit who was rehabilitated and then went back there on his own, and maybe it's suspected that he could have started his own cult, whose name still, identity still yet to be revealed, because he was also actually struggling by the time it was discovered. And but so still, we believe that it's still, yes, different, but still linked to the first case, because he could have relapsed and gone back there and started his own outfit that is now being linked to the current cases that we're talking about.
What do we know about the 11 suspects under investigation?
Yeah, there's still some are being rehabilitated, and but of course we know that they're waiting to be processed by the state security agents for them to be also processed by the courts later on. But we just know that they're also being rehabilitated, especially in terms of their health, because they were really in a very bad shape. But remember that Paul Mackenzie and his team and his co-accused are still languishing in prison as their cases drag on as we wait for the outcome. And he has recently been complaining of mistreatment in the courts, and that he says that he's also being denied justice because he needs to be released on bail, but the courts have refused to grant him that wish.
Have exhumations begun, and what has been found so far?
Not really, they have not yet begun. The court just ruled and actually ordered for the exhumations to begin, but they are not yet begun so far officially. But so far, what I know is that security and health officials have gathered at the area, and they're also try to know whether these fresh graves that have just been discovered are linked to the first case. So probably by next week there'll be some progress on the same, and we'll be able to report on that as the news emerge from the area.
How is the government responding to this new development?
Largely silently, because apart from the court ruling and some here and there press statements from local junior security officials, the government has largely been quiet about it. Remember that it is being suspected that we could be talking about over 1,000 more bodies in the Shakahola Forest, that's Shakahola, that are waiting to be exhumed. So we know that there is a lot of information that could be kept away from the members of the public, in the knowledge that there are some 429 bodies that are still in the mortuary awaiting to be processed. And so far, there are fears that there could be foreigners involved. There is actually a white person who had been identified as part of the people who had died in that incident, in that first case. So the government has really been taking a very low-profile approach on the same, and like what we saw during the protest when the government was quite out and about over the issue.
Do you know anything about investigations, and also just give us a feel of how the people are reacting?
Actually, the locals are wondering what's going on with that, because it's a community land, and they normally lease it out to farmers, and those people want to also settle and set up businesses there. So when this news came out, most of them really wondered, because the victims were not from the local area. They came from other parts of the country. We call it up country because this place is in the coastal Kenya. So they are really wondering what's going on there, and why some particular people from a particular region, mostly in Western Kenya, are falling victim to these cults that are emerging all over the place. And remember that even Mackenzie himself is not from Western Kenya. He had settled there initially to do farming, but his followers actually followed him there. He had initially started his community TV station, which is later sold to another priest, and he had actually decided not to go on with this preaching and this radicalization thing, but his followers actually followed him there, and that's why it all happened once again. So locals are wondering what's going on in the country, and there's also that feel that churches and religious organizations need to be regulated by the state in the country. And so far, the government has introduced new tax laws that will also target the religious organizations as a way of clamping down on these radical and sectarian forms of violent approaches to religion.
Alexa, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, and have a good one.
That was Nairobi correspondent Alex Kiarie bringing us the latest on the disturbing case emerging from Kilifi County.